Hello, all y'all out there in Radio Land. It is once again that time of the week. That time of the week where we dig underneath the headlines. We take a shovel and try to unearth the straight up truths that are hiding beneath the veneer of all of the corporate propaganda. And generally, we do our best to call out the establishment on its BS. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for leftist news, both locally, statewide, nationally, and internationally. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may, in fact, turn out to be. So I'm joined by I'm a co-host. Co-host, yes. That's how you know we're live, folks, when I have, verbal diarrhea, it comes through. But yes, it's first time Nora's been here in a couple weeks. Glad to have her back. Yeah. And are you ready to sink your teeth into, one of the various stories we're going to be talking about? I don't know if
boy, am I ever. I'm so ready. I have no idea which ones we're going to start with.
Oh, yeah. Actually, you know what? Let's go. Why don't we start with something that, it wasn't necessarily on the list, but I am interested in kind of hearing what your take on this is. There was an incident that happened last week where, a lot of you may be aware of the Green New Deal and particularly the Sunrise Movement, who they were the main instigators, as it were, that crashed Nancy Pelosi's office that famous first day of AOC. It wasn't her first day, but she got to Washington and she joined them and kind of got the snowball rolling on the Green New Deal. So same people from the Sunrise Movement, not the exact same people, but the same organization. Again, it's, for those who don't know, it's mostly teenagers and young kids who are trying to lobby people in Congress to, make sure that they actually can grow up and have a future that does not resemble something like, Fallout or Fallout New Vegas, or definitely not Fallout 76, because that's just a disaster all around. And they decided to try to talk to Dianne Feinstein, who, and it's hard. If I were to just read the transcript, you might not understand precisely what the hubbub is about. But you watch the video, and it's agonizing to watch these kids be confronted with this 85-year-old, very centrist senator. I mean, really, we talk about Dino, Democrat in name only. This woman is the poster child for it. This is a woman who, back in, was it the 70s or 80s? But I believe it's San Francisco. There was a protest about the mayor taking down the Confederate flag. The mayor, of course, of that time was Dianne Feinstein.
No, she was fighting to keep up the flag, and the protesters.
Yes, exactly.
So, I mean, it's been on international news. You've probably seen this video of these little kids going up and asking to not have their world be destroyed to the senator. Mm-hmm. And she's the one that's acting like she's the grown-up in the room about it. And
it's not going to happen in 10 years.
You're all going to die, kiddos.
Yeah. It does make me wonder, that fundamental disconnect where it's you got to be realistic. You can't fix this in 10 years. And it's realistically, we have to fix it in 10 years or there's
no be
word.
10 years.
Yeah.
I think another thing that really strikes me as about how shockingly out of touch she is. Our world is changing way faster than our politicians can keep track of it. And she tweeted recently, I think she made a statement recently that she was shocked that like minutes after this stuff happened, some random person with a cell phone who recorded it like just uploaded it, and it like went on the news all over the place. And she said, no, this kind of stuff happens, especially since she's on the Senate Intelligence Committee, supposed to oversee, things like the NSA. So how is our politicians supposed to do stuff about, climate change and technology when they don't even have the basic understanding of it?
Well, do you remember when the House, or was it the House or Senate, was interviewing Mark Zuckerberg? And like for the most part, it sounded less like them grilling him about really pressing moral, philosophical issues having to do legal issues as well, having to do with privacy, and more kind of like when your grandpa calls you and like, Nora, how do I get the Google to work? Can you tell me? Yes.
Well, first of all, Grandpa, you need to be alive. Then you need to
sorry. Didn't mean to bring your hypothetical.
Don't worry about it.
All right. But we're trying to turn it off and on again. Anyway. So, it really speaks to just like, if they're out of touch on how technology works, like it does make me wonder, like how many of these people in Congress actually have like a legit idea of like the scale of the problem that we're dealing with. You really do have to ask these questions, basic questions about like how well researched our legislature actually is. I'm reminded we're kind of popcorning to different issues, but I think it's all around this issue of like that'll be the summary of this when I posted the video later. Like, we discuss how our legislature is dumb as a rock. But it reminds me a bit of I believe is Max Blumenthal. Somebody he's from Alternate. He was going around interviewing various members of the House and Senate. And about Venezuela, about what was going on in Venezuela. And most of them had no idea what was actually going on in Venezuela. And the most they could get them was basically a repeat of, the state-sanctioned talking point. And they couldn't go any further on it. As a matter of fact, one congressperson, I can't remember his name, but he was outright open about it. It's like, look, Venezuela is not my issue. I'm against socialist dictators, but I haven't really done any research on this. And then, like, I think Max asked us, like, will you? And he's like, I don't know, I'm busy. And then he left. He dashed off. And yeah, it does make me wonder, again, Dianne Feinstein is somebody who's taken lots and lots of money from the fossil fuel industry in her time.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, you have to wonder, it's like, is it just, have they not researched how dire the problem is? Or worse, do they know and just don't care?
It could be either, because when during the State of the Union, when Trump mentioned that the U.S. became the largest producer of oil out of any country, most of the Congress stood up and applauded. So either they know and they don't care, they don't know and don't want to know, or they're just, what's most likely is that it doesn't really matter whether they know or not. They're just errand boys to these policies of promoting fossil fuels.
Yeah, and keep in mind, it has not been until extremely recently, like since the last election cycle, that Democrats have even begun to really talk about climate change in a substantive way. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that, former President Barack Obama, keep in mind, both him and Hillary Clinton were all about that fossil fuel, localized American fossil fuel extraction that, Trump talked up at his State of the Union address. Actually, when Obama recently, was it Davos he went to, where he made that really grating speech? It was some conference full of rich a-holes. Let's just put it that way. But he commented about how under his watch, America became, the largest producer of fossil fuels in the world, and basically said, fossil fuel industry, you owe me a big thank you for, helping your business during my administration. So again, the scary thing that, is the subtext of that interaction, beyond just Dianne Feinstein dismissing children, is that it is an attitude, a fundamental attitude among a lot of Democrats that they just don't care about the problem. And up until very recently, they didn't even have to pretend not to. And now it's only that you're actually seeing the effects of climate change that these Democrats are even giving lip service to it. But before that, their biggest goal was this kind of bipartisan corporate agenda to shift fossil fuel extraction to the United States so that they're not so dependent on foreign entities. But again, fossil fuel extraction, period, needs to stop. We need to keep it in the ground. But,
yeah. That's absolutely true. And that's keep in mind that the Green New Deal in the first place has a huge approval rating. What, something like 70 something? I'm trying to pull out the specific number.
Yeah, it has a plurality. Even among Republicans, it's quite popular.
81%. This is from the recent survey from the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication and George Mason University found that a whopping 81% of voters said they either strongly support or somewhat support the Green New Deal. That's 40 for strongly and 41 for somewhat support, including 64% of Republicans.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah. So it's not like this is a really far left idea. No, this is really popular, and people want to see this happen and it's gotten more quickly popular even than Medicare for All, which is not something I'd predict to say early in this year, but I'm really happy that it is, because it's necessary. Literally, the majority of people on the planet are going to die if this does not happen in not just the U.S., but a lot of really high emissions countries. Who's to say if it'll actually happen in the EU and China, something like this? But I know that both of those blocks are making some progress on it, so we'll see.
Yeah. I think from that, I'd like to move to talking about some local politicians. This story about how some of our local House reps voted on the wall. Okay.
More specifically, the emergency declaration.
Yes, the emergency declaration. So this is one of those rare times where we spend an inordinate amount of time dragging Fred Upton, deservedly, on our show. We will give him a little bit of props today, and then we'll probably still critique and criticize his decision anyway, because that's how we are, man. That's how dialectics work. All right. We're dissing everybody for the better of the all. All right. Yeah. It's do that self crit. You gotta. That's how you get better. Anyway. So I'll read a little bit from the article, and then I'm sure me and Nora will dive a little deeper and discuss it. In particular, it talks about 2 Michigan Republicans go against Trump on border wall emergency declaration. It was updated, or I think it was published yesterday. So, West Michigan Congressman Fred Upton and Justin Amash were among the 13 House Republicans to vote for a resolution to try to block President Donald Trump's emergency declaration to build a border wall. The vote, held Tuesday, February 26th, was 245 to 182 in favor of the Democratic-sponsored resolution to terminate Trump's declaration and prevent him from using funds targeted for other programs. Upton released a statement later Tuesday to explain his vote. The Constitution makes it clear that the power of the purse, quote-unquote, spending, be initiated by the Congress. Our founding fathers believed in the principles of checks and balances, and it is our responsibility as members of Congress to maintain that authority, no matter who is president. Strengthening our borders is an urgent necessity, but declaring a national emergency and reprogramming already appropriated funds without the approval of Congress is a violation of the Constitution, he said. Oh, okay. So a quote-unquote principled decision from Representative Upton. So, he's technically speaking, he's not wrong about one thing in particular, and it is that it's been made a very potent argument of the unconstitutional nature of Trump's emergency declaration, which, frankly, that weird rambling announcement he did following the declaration, he basically explained himself why it was unconstitutional. He really showed his ass. Not that he does all the time.
He said during that initial speech that I didn't have to do this. I just want to do it faster. Yeah. So we're gonna go to the court and we're gonna get that ruling. Then we take it to the Supreme Court. Believe me.
Yeah, and it's if you were an attorney going in to argue about the constitutionality, that's exactly what you'd say. It's he didn't have to do this. He just wanted to do it to make it faster. He was just trying to make. It seems like he was just trying to make their job as easy as possible. It's hard to tell if it's because Donald Trump's senile or he's just exasperated about this whole being the president thing. Thought it was gonna be so much fun. People they ask me to make decisions every day.
Well, he used to play golf and watch TV all day, so it's not such a bad job if you ask me. But I'm kind of. I was worried, definitely worried about what might have happened if after declaring a state of emergency, if he might try to use some of the other presidential dictator powers that you would get with that sort of declaration. But it's really not happening. I thought it might happen because it's Trump and he's a fascist, but it's not happening because it's Trump and he's an idiot. Yeah. It'll be interesting. I haven't seen too many articles about this, but. It's something that we kind of predicted last time we talked about this was a popular tactic of this administration is to threaten fascism or threaten an authoritarian measure, freak out the public, and then while nobody's looking, rob the public purse. So I'm not sure. I'm not pointing to anything specific here, but keep your eye out in the next couple of weeks. There might be some good coverage on one of your popular independent media sites about some kind of fire sale that Trump did with his presidential powers during this emergency to help enrich himself. That's my main prediction. That's what I think is kind of the crux behind this national emergency. I mean, we've even talked before that the company that is building the steel slats for this wall has direct financial ties to Donald Trump. It will financially enrich him and enrich his friend who is producing the steel slats if the wall gets built. So yeah, I don't know. Any comment on that? I know he wanted a big concrete wall originally, but maybe he knew this. Maybe this is sort of part of the plan, to get him to buy his cheap steel that he imported from China and uses on all his buildings.
Ah, yeah. Four-dimensional chess, everybody.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm a smart person.
That's the that's the real twist. Is what the QAnon people were right. He has been playing four-dimensional chess all along, but but he's playing it with the goal in mind to rob all of us, not to. I don't know. They think he's some kind of JFK type. I won't get into that. Well, I used to do a special episode about that. It's my Marxist critique of the QAnon phenomenon. Excuse me. So, okay, here's where I'm going to step in and be a little bit cynical. So we gave Upton a little bit of props. Now, what is the political triangulation and strategy behind this? As we've talked a lot about on the show, Upton likes to sell himself as I am a moderate Republican. This is even before the Trump came along. He gets a lot of mileage out of being inoffensive, and for occasionally, almost in a weird strategic way, doing the right thing. And look, I won't say that he's only doing these for the politics of it. I don't know where his heart lies. I mean, his heart lies in a place where he can just ruin the environment and sell it off to corporations, but he has occasionally done nice things for humans. I know he's written He's written letters and tried to exert some influence on behalf of anti-Sahita. There was actually a couple years before that, there was another gentleman who he's a popular community member who was under threat of deportation, and Upton swung his weight around a little bit for that. But it does feel that the cynical part of me says that he's trying to appeal to the liberal left of the 6th District. Let's not forget he had the closest call of his political career in the last election. At various points in the night, it almost looked like Matt Longjohn was going to take it. So, he has everything to gain and everything to lose by not trying to appeal, or by trying to appeal to that liberal core that lives in Kalamazoo. And again, it continues to give him this cover as a moderate Republican so that he can go off and make tons of very pro-business, anti-worker decisions.
I'm checking the statistics on his votes right now, and he's voted with Trump's positions about 87% of the time, according to 538.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. This is a guy who... there's a really interesting passage about Upton in the book Dark Money. And by the way, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Pick it up. It's a very detailed kind of history and deconstruction of how money and politics works in the United States. But, we talk a lot about how particularly his environmental record shifted right. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Koch brothers, back in that big Tea Party wave of the early 2010s, basically threatened to primary his butt unless he, towed the line on fossil fuels. You literally witness him become a climate change denier after that election. So, again, props to him for, pointing out the obvious, which is how this is unconstitutional. But, yeah, he doesn't, again, like, for me, and I know, being the, like, anarcho-communist that I am, he wouldn't really score any political points in my book to begin with. But anybody else... don't believe the hype. He is still a guy who's made lots and lots of really bad decisions for Southwest Michigan, and just because he disagrees with Cheeto Mussolini 13% of the time does not mean that he's your friend, or in fact that he's good for the district.
Yeah, interesting you bring up like Cheeto Mussolini, because we recently had like a Texas senator quote Mussolini on Twitter and get called out for it. So do always be watching what our politicians do and say, because they'll probably say some like really effed up stuff and otherwise get away with it. Mm-hmm. And maybe they'll do less effed up stuff and don't let them get away with trying to let them look better than they actually are.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can't believe quoted Mussolini with no context. This is America. Is that on you? That's it. All right. Okay, I think with that, it's about 6:30. Let's go ahead and go to a break. When we come back, we'll have a lot to talk about. Maybe talk a little bit about New Deal Grandpa. A little bit about some more local issues. We want to highlight an article later in the program about the homeless population. So, y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
You are tuned to 89.1 WIDR, the only source for radio evolution.
Through the years, smiles and tears live as one. Will come a son who loves a thing that loves to sing. Voting is important. From deciding Kalamazoo's best drunk food to picking the fan favorite for Wider's Battle of the Bands, voting allows people to voice their opinions and change their world. To vote for offices such as mayors, senators, and the president takes a little more than a link to a Google Forms survey. Before you vote, you have to register. This can be done in person, by mail, and, in many states, online. For more information, you can point your favorite web browser to vote.gov.
Hello, everybody. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So, we were just talking earlier, let's keep it local. Let's keep it going. There's something that we wanted to bring up, which, it wasn't like a big news story or something like that, but it came up in discussion in some of our activist circles, and we definitely wanted to touch on it. So, here's the real irony with this. So there is a new business that's going to be taking residence over on the north side called Whitman and Associates. It really wanted to, like, there's a joke there. The white man is coming. So, yeah, seriously. WHIT man, like, that's literally how it's spelled. Here's something that, like, I wanted to hit on, because this came under my radar because, we talk a lot about gentrification, and, I wanted to find out a little bit more about, like, who this business is and what they're actually about. And it definitely does not sound like they are there to be a job creator for the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. So, Nora, I know you said you looked up there was a previous article about this. This isn't like new news.
I guess it must have opened recently, but there's an article about it not too long ago about how they're planning to open a new location there, moving it from Portage. Now, I don't know who's being hired at this new location, but I'm gonna guess they're bringing a lot of same people from their Portage office over there. Not only were a new location, they said, one of the directors of the previous office said, not only will our new location create a welcoming and comfortable environment for staff and clients, it gives us the ability to hire additional team members and expand our services in the Kalamazoo region. So they are giving lip service to hiring people at least, which is from the local community, which is something that you should definitely pay attention to when, a new trendy, shiny looking business building moves into the poor part of town near downtown for some reason. Then, we'll see what happens. This is like just developing. This article that I'm quoting here about them moving is from late October. So it's been in the works for a while now, but this isn't the only sort of small to medium-sized business I'd seen randomly pop up on Northside near downtown. There was a couple of live local bands that played at this coffee shop that I've never seen before in the Northside that looked it looked very much like one of those, like, upscale startup-y coffee shops you'd expect to see somewhere in like Ann Arbor, but it was there in the Northside, and I'm thinking why? But like I figured out pretty quickly because when I was at the show for the venue, like pretty much everyone there was almost everyone there was white, and they all looked like hipsters, and people I haven't even met before. Remarkably enough, the only person I've met there other than the people I came with was someone who apparently was staying at the same office I work for, which is that one bougie design center in Colony Farms.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the North Side is definitely getting gentrified if these two businesses aren't examples for you.
Yeah, and just to give like a little bit of perspective, Whitman and Associates, they have a history of like investing in things like casinos and primarily like hiring like upwardly mobile white office workers. So we're not just pulling this stuff out of our butts. It's like how it works all the time. It's very similar. It reminds me of like what happened with Amazon in New York recently. Where again they talked about we're going to create lots of jobs. We're going to create lots of jobs. You're going to create lots of jobs for white people from Seattle that were already a part of your workforce to come and do. And again, we talk about gentrification on the show a lot. And these are the things to look out for. You have these companies like Whitman that is their history, and that is their modus operandi. And to say that they're going to somehow help the community that surrounds it is pretty laughable, honestly. And we have developers who are, I describe it as like kind of biting chunks out of the northern part of the Vine neighborhood and the southern part of Northside, and basically trying to broaden the yuppie cushion around downtown. No offense to the yuppies out there, except full offense. Stop being a yuppie. In capitalism. Anyway, but yeah, it's again, I wanted to point this out specifically because that's the kind of corporation that is buying up this land in the North Side. I think people need to be fundamentally aware of that that it is not their standard operating practice to hire in people from the neighborhood. They bring in their own workforce, much like a lot of these other corporations do. Use the space, more or less because it's cheap. Actually, wanted to read a little bit from the thread. The business, this particular business, and some of the kind of more wealthier, capital-minded workers have bought several properties and farms that were either foreclosed or owned by the land bank, and sold very cheaply because of illegal dumps on the property. So I'm going to quote a little bit from here. The owner of Leyline Farms said she bought the land dirt cheap and cleaned up the illegal landfill on the property. Her husband is a contractor for Whitman. She deleted all of her posts talking about the transfer of the land and wouldn't answer questions after we started asking her more details about the landfill and the purchase of the land. We were able to find out that the previous owner, whom she said had to leave the state and sold the land dirt cheap, worked for Upton at the time, split the land 3 to 4 ways and sold it in chunks. These new owners bought 2 parcels and combined them to a farm. She would not say what was dumped on the property. So again, like this is a very tangled web here in both Kalamazoo and the 6th District. Again, it doesn't surprise me to see this kind of stuff going on, and I think a lot of people do kind of miss that key connection between gentrification and the buy-up of rural land by a lot of the particularly the moneyed class out of Chicago coming into the 6th District and buying up that cheap farmland. It uses similar tactics, and it's again, it's whether it's on the north side of Kalamazoo or a rural area that's been like a toxic dump site, these land values are pushed low for a particular and strategic reason, and it's so that these developers can buy up this land as cheap as they can and then exploit it for their own purposes and exploit it in a way that does not actually help the surrounding community. It only enriches themselves, their business, and those with whom they prefer to share the wealth, but certainly not the actual communities they operate in.
Yeah, I think you put it better than I really could have. That's good on ya.
Yeah. All right. It's analysis. Yeah. Woo! All right. Well, I don't know if I have too much else on that particular point, or on that particular story. I'm sorry. But again, I think it's something very important for us to talk about. Now with that, I did want to mention again, props to excuse me. Props to Gretchen Whitmer. Again, last week we mentioned how she put the kibosh on the planned, or the discussed and quite disgusting ice facility that they were trying to basically scoop up there at Ionia. And with that, I also wanted to talk a little bit about... Oh, excuse me. Oh, that's right. Were we, Nora, did we want to talk a little bit about Chicago?
Recently, local elections, the first round of them happened in Chicago, which it's how it works there. It's like the whole city has these elections, and if an alderman, basically the equivalent of a city councilor or like a mayoral candidate, gets more than 50% of the vote, they avoid a runoff and they're already elected. But that wasn't something that we saw very often because there's a lot of competition this one, a lot of pushback from the machine. And if some of the more radical folks win, then maybe we'll see less of these rich mofos from the city coming to buy our farmland and stuff. But
so many, everybody I know in Chicago is sick and tired of Rahm Emanuel. And
well, he did resign. He's not running again. There's reasons for that I can get into right now, in fact.
Oh, sure.
So where should I start? All right, so when the Daley dynasty stepped down after decades and decades of running Chicago, Rahm Emanuel seized the chance to make a graceful exit from the Obama administration, where centrist policies and bullying tactics will make him the persona non grata and ride Obama's coattails to victory in the Chicago mayoral race. This is from an In These Times article. With close ties to Wall Street, he took pinstripe pastriness to a new level, courting finance, capital, and pouring money into a glitzy downtown, while disdaining the needs of the city's working class, especially the underserved black and brown neighborhoods. Sound familiar? His first budget laid off public workers such as police and fire dispatchers, cut social services for domestic violence victims and the elderly, increased fines and fees from everything from parking to vehicle stickers to water service. Public libraries were forced to reduce hours, and infamously, half of Chicago's mental health clinics were closed, and also a lot of their public schools. And he privatized city services all over the place. They gave him the nickname Mayor 1%, and spread high-end developments, private venues to gentrify the place. So he's gotten a lot of controversy lately, especially with how he's handled police killings of unarmed black kids, like in Chicago. And he had such a low approval rating that he couldn't not announced that he was stepping down after this election. So yeah, it really is a good thing that he's getting out of there. He was bad news. Even before he was with the Obama administration, he worked with the DCCC to suppress progressive challengers in the early 2000s. So this guy has been bad news for a long time. Now, what's good news is five DSA members have made it either to the next round, and one of those five have actually made it through the. We'll not have to be doing the runoff The most progressive candidate for mayor didn't quite make it, but we have a really solid other option in. The solid other option is. I'm sorry, I'm like we're kind of reading through some of this. There's a lot to really take apart in here.
I guess and I'm speaking I have not been following Chicago politics. Perhaps not as much as we should. Detroit and Chicago are really like our kind of sister cities here for everybody in the broadcast range. And by sister cities, I mean they're close enough to drive to a concert to. So
oh yeah.
But no, it is important to know what is going on, particularly in those two cities, because they're very much in our backyard. So in a nutshell, with Chicago, you described a little bit of the dynamics there. Like, who would you say is there like somebody carrying the establishment torch from Rahm Emanuel? And who is like the quintessential leftist candidate? And I know you mentioned the DSA members. Were they running for like city council or all?
Yeah,
of them
they were running
there?
for city council. Well, it's called alderman there, but there's a handful of them, and I'm sure I couldn't look at all the results in time to really do this. The election literally just got counted last night, but I'm sure there's a good handful of activist candidates that made it through. There is a really good chance that they'll be able to get like a little bit under a majority because they already started with what is it? I think the Progressive Caucus there had around like a fourth of the members of the, I guess, the city governments. But there's like, as for mayor, this is probably the easiest way to put it. There's a Periwinkle versus Lightfoot, and those are the two that are going to make it to the runoff. Periwinkle has way more support in the south side versus Lightfoot on the north side of the city. And interestingly enough, no matter which one of them they vote for, Chicago will have their first black female candidate either way. Oh. And if Lightfoot wins, she would be the first openly gay mayor of Chicago. However, Lightfoot does have a pretty shady past in terms of being a prosecutor. She was a career prosecutor in a similar vein to Kamala Harris.
Oh, no.
If that gives you the short version of what her record is like. Like, she worked for the U.S. Assistant Attorney for Northern Illinois for 96 to 02. And I think what probably the most egregious example I can think of is when she lied in court to wrongfully deport someone named Lars Erik Lindstrom. When Lightfoot was acting as U.S. Attorney, she deliberately misled a judge and was reprimanded for misconduct by a federal court of appeals, and which is, really bad news in somewhere that's supposed to be a sanctuary city and where, there's all sorts of scandals involving, the police that you hear like almost every other month, and that huge cop academy that they're trying to build in the south side, right next to like a school. There's a lot of really effed up stuff, and you definitely don't want a career prosecutor to be the mayor of the city. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But a lot of the reasons that these activist candidates were able to get as far as they did in this election was because of a lot of like really sort of spontaneous activism that's bubbled up, like mostly led by black youth in the city, and it's really impressive what these communities have been able to do. The ones that have been targeted by these harmful policies have really been able to organize and stand up for their communities in creative ways that might finally be starting to pay off pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, hats off to our comrades in Chicago. There is some really incredible organizing going over there, going on over there. Sorry, that is to say. In fact, a little bit envious myself of just how cohesively they have their as stuff together. And yeah, good luck to all the DSA candidates running over in Chicago, and particularly anybody who's even running like further left of that. Good luck getting your message out, and hopefully win. Get some radical leftists in office over there. So, oops. I think one thing right before we started on this topic, there's something I kind of forgot to bring up about Kalamazoo. There was this article published just the other day about our homeless population, and it's something that we've talked a lot about on the show. Homeless issues in Kalamazoo, and of course the large Bronson Park protest that was going on. But I did want to take a minute just to. This is just some really good local journalism that I wanted to tip my hat off to, and I'm going to read kind of some excerpts from this article. But it's about basically how a lot of homeless folks are. They're not necessarily at the mission. They are not at a shelter overnight. They're camping out in the outdoors, and that includes on cold winter nights. So I'm going to read a little bit from this article, and we can talk about it a little bit, and then I think after that, maybe we'll go and do a little break. But again, this is Malachi Barrett wrote this. It was published February 26th. Veiled behind trees near a quiet neighborhood street, Butch Austin, Carla Hofacker, and their 2 dogs are surviving winter inside an abandoned minivan. Austin said they bear unbelievable cold each night by the heat of a kerosene heater, starving off hunger and discomfort behind tarps draped over missing doors and windows. An hour after the sun set on February 20th, social workers on a street outreach team brought the couple blankets, water, and other supplies. Finding the hidden places people seek shelter is part of the daily job for staff in the housing department for KCMH. That's Kalamazoo County Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. And actually, I just want to play a quick clip from this article. This is the couple in question being interviewed.
Very unbelievable cold. I was actually crying last night because my feet, my toes were so cold, I couldn't handle it. I got so cold, I didn't know what to do. I actually found an abandoned van down by the Kalamazoo River. The windows, the doors were all knocked off. Pretty filthy. I put all cardboard boxes in the windows. I got 2 tarps over it to help heat the heat in. I got the tires up there so it don't blow it off. I got sticks around it to help me get like a warning, a protection, so people won't get so close so my dogs could hear them. It's hard. One of us pretty much just got to stay out here all the time because one time both of us were gone. We had our blankets taken. We came back and we had to start all over. That was a bad day for us. People need to understand, just because we're homeless don't mean we're bad people. We just had a bad situation and we're struggling. We're out here and we want another chance. People don't tend to give the homeless people the chances or the understandings that they need. Not enough. Very few. I've been unfortunate, and hopefully this will help me and I can get the help, and I got a job interview tomorrow.
So going on, I want to read a little bit more from this. Talked a little bit here with, housing manager Erica Patton said the head count of homeless people in the community does not truly catch the picture of homelessness, especially since people are less likely to be on the street in the winter, but offers an opportunity to build relationships with people in need. Patton, who experienced homelessness herself, leads the boots on the ground effort to reconnect people disillusioned by failed institutions with an imperfect system. It takes persistence to earn their trust, she said. Meanwhile, the number of people sleeping outside is noticeably growing, Patton said. According to the 2018 count, there were 567 people experiencing homelessness in Kalamazoo County. This included 446 in emergency shelters, 68 in traditional housing, and 53 who were unsheltered. Patton said 55 unsheltered people were counted. A count of the people in emergency and transitional shelters was still being compiled, but Patton estimated between 600 to 700 people were found. The unsheltered population is historically a small group, according to past point-in-time counts, but appears to be on the rise. The share of homeless people living on the streets grew from 1.4% to 9% in the last 3 years, according to past counts. So that's almost 4 times as many people who are literally sleeping on the streets or sleeping in tents or sleeping in aqueducts here in Kalamazoo. And again, that is during this very cold winter that we've been having. And granted, we were able to, but when I say we, I mean a lot of the grassroots activists here in town were able to assemble some emergency shelters during the coldest of this winter. That doesn't mean there aren't still people outside. And, it's going to get cold again this weekend. It's going to get down into the single digits, plus wind chill. And there's going to be people like this couple who are having to sleep out there and bear through the elements. And, again, we've talked a lot about the inadequacy of the gospel mission. But, this is a main factor. A lot of people would rather, dignity counts for a lot. And a lot of these people would rather, bear the cold weather and have some independence than go somewhere where they feel disrespected, marginalized, or where they feel they're going to be living in poor conditions. And by poor I mean like bad conditions.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say about this. I hope they're okay, as many of them as possible. I know a lot of them won't be.
Yeah, and there are people coming up with solutions to this. There's some really good news about the Hope Network was talking about creating like a tiny house community. Unfortunately, I think like one of the main problems there's a lack of holistic solutions to these problems, and by that I mean one of the problems that they were running into with this tiny house community is. Initially, the apparatus was just like, just find these people, they'll be responsible for upkeep, bring them in, and just have them live there. Of course, if they can't keep up with rents or their maintenance duties, they get kicked out. And you end up with something along the line where you just have all these empty tiny houses that were supposed to be for the homeless, but the program wasn't really set up in a thorough way to teach them these skills. And you could see like, I don't know, like a bunch of hipsters might take it over. And again, to go back to the earlier point I just made, there's a lack of holistic solutions. There's also a lack of solutions that really take into account the urgency of this. Again, you have people sleeping in the winter. We need at least like a municipal shelter or something that could be open to people during particularly cold weather or during emergencies or crisis, but we just do not have that. And again, the Kalamazoo Gospel Mission is often kind of counted as one of those shelters when legally speaking, I don't even think you're supposed to count a religious institution like the KGM as being part of that calculus. I want to just read another really alarming figure. From 2017 to 18, the number of people defined as chronically homeless in Kalamazoo County increased from 26 to 129, a jump of almost 400%.
Over a year?
Yes.
Yikes.
And Patton responded, she said, that's because the annual count is becoming more accurate, but substance abuse and people coming to Kalamazoo from other parts of the state have also contributed to that number. A lack of affordable housing in the county is one of the toughest barriers to overcome, she said. We can't find housing, Patton said. We're begging landlords. Prices have gone up so much. You're talking about people who have criminal histories and evictions and no one wants to rent to them. On top of a market where you can't find a unit anywhere. It's impossible. Austin, 53, and Hofacker, 48, lived in Kalamazoo Township for 7 years before the neglected house they rented was condemned in 2017. They moved in with family and saved $1,000 for an apartment, but Austin said his rental applications were denied because he has no credit and a criminal record. We broke down and I had to use the money to survive, he said. And look, I would really recommend everybody, take some time, definitely read this article. It is very illuminating and it's just good journalism. And, again, this is an issue we've talked a lot about on the show, and unfortunately it doesn't look like we'll be stopping anytime soon. So, I think we'll just go ahead and leave it with that. We're going to take a little break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. Hold on a sec, y'all. Sorry, the computer was being a little slow there. All right, we should be good. Yeah.
WIDR, wider on the go.
Stay tuned for Wider's weekly RSO Spotlight on WIDR Kalamazoo.
Imagine yourself in a time of magic and heroes, adventuring through lands and battling monsters. Hi, I'm Sarah Trager, Advising and Marketing Director for Broncos and Beholders. Our goal with this club is to introduce the role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons. We meet every Thursday, 8 to 11 p.m. in Bernhardt Center, room 105. To find out more, visit our Facebook, Broncos and Beholders, D&D at WMU, or email broncosandbeholders@gmail.com. Come join us and be the hero of your new world.
This has been our weekly RSO Spotlight on WIDR Kalamazoo. For more information on how to spotlight your RSO, head to WIDRFM.org.
Just a second, folks. We'll be right back on air. y'all, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Sorry for those light technical difficulties. Usually we're able to juggle around all of our devices and sound inputs, but sometimes a little bit of a fumble. I talked about this a lot last week. I kind of got up on my anarcho-communist soapbox and talked about how revolution's more important than reform. I do want to start again. Last week was an episode I really wished I had my co-hosts with me, just kind of get their thoughts. But I'm sure next time Lawrence is on, I will get his. But initial reactions. I wanted to ask your initial reactions, Nora, somebody who's been deeply involved in progressive political organizing for the last several years. New Deal Grandpa is running for president again. And before we get into, we're going to talk a little bit about that town hall, but I just want to know, what is your kind of initial take on this development? I talked about mine.
When I saw that he announced and he raised way more than Kamala Harris or anyone else did, and only small dollar donations, just like usual. This was in less than 4 hours. So I'm really happy that he's running. I'm really happy that he's already got this kind of crazy momentum. I'm glad that he's already hammering away at the same issues. I've mentioned I've had some problems with him before. He's not quite as anti-war as Tulsi Gabbard is. He, voted for Sesta Fosta, and I think there's one other issue I have with him that not coming to mind right now. But he's fantastic. I'd be very happy to have him president. Will a Bernie Sanders presidency solve a lot of our problems? Yes. Will it save us from capitalism? Probably not. Will he try to save capitalism like FDR did? I don't know if that's necessarily true either. His policies do kind of make him seem a bit more of a reformer than a revolutionary. But I don't really know what he's going to actually do as president. But there's keep in mind, even if Congress is going to go against him, there's a lot of things that a U.S. president can just command to do unilaterally that can make a huge difference in people's lives. There's a lot of laws already on the books against monopolies, etc., that aren't really being enforced. I'm sure there's plenty of environmental laws that are not really being enforced at all by our feds. And I still think there's a whole lot of potential there. Do not get too caught up in electoralism, of course. Direct action is what gets the goods. But a President Sanders would do fantastic things for people around the country, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, and I hear you too. And just let everybody know, as far as electoralism goes, if you're thinking about spending the rest of your year knocking doors for Bernie Sanders, please don't forget there is an election this November in Kalamazoo where we're going to be choosing 3 city commissioners and a new mayor. Bobby Hopewell is stepping down, so keep your eye on what's going on in your backyard, because again, electoralism, to whatever degree you believe in it or whatever, what happens locally always affects you a lot more intimately than what's going on at the national level. And I would that's my biggest caveat is don't get wrapped up in the Bernie Sanders stuff too early, because we got our own oligarchy right here in Kalamazoo. We gotta talk about it. Right? It's the oligarchy and the crumbling infrastructure, the homeless, and etc.
Yeah. With how happy I am, with the announcing of Bernie running, I'm still pretty unhappy that we have to talk this much about the 2020 race when we just got done with another election.
Yeah, I hear that.
I think 2 very significant, quick hits I wanted to say about Bernie is, right after he announced, the Trump re-election campaign sent out a bunch of emailers, basically asking for donations, trying to scare his supporters, his policies are full-blown socialism, and he already raised a ton of money,
And he wasn't, as far as I know, Trump didn't send out emails about, Kamala Harris or even, Elizabeth Warren. There is that sense, they are actually afraid of this candidacy.
Yeah, they are. That's the whole idea that... And I don't think they'll as easily get away with kind of trashing on Bernie for identity politics, at least with credibility this time, because almost like everyone on his campaign except for one is non-white, and most of the members of his like main campaign leadership are also women. So you have California Representative Ro Khanna, San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz, former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, and the Ben from Ben and Jerry's, which I found was interesting. Mm-hmm. But Ben's obviously the one white dude on his campaign leadership. But
it's the really important ice cream constituency.
Oh yeah, they got to make sure they get those ice cream eaters. Yeah, that's how you win elections.
That's how you get people to scream, man. See, remember all those rallies from 2016? It wasn't, people weren't actually cheering for Bernie. It's just the Ben and Jerry guys were like on the sides being like, free ice cream, everybody. Yeah.
Nobody in this country should have to work 40 hours a week and not get free ice cream.
There's some kindergartner running for class president right now.
Oh, man.
You just gave him his platform right there. Again, like, I think that's my main concern is like the idea that it takes everything else out of the room, and this kind of ties into I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about the town hall, but what was something I wanted to mention. I think he really kind of not necessarily put his foot in his mouth, but there was the way he approached the reparations question. Now, if you actually listen to it, it kind of here's how it goes. So it starts out, and I'm like a little nervous, like where's he going with this? And then he gets into his groove, his territory. He was talking about data and numbers. He talks about racial disparities and income inequality, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's great. And then what happens is he doesn't outright dismiss it like he did in 2016, and frankly, I think that was the worst thing he did in that particular election cycle. But what he did at town hall really wasn't that much better. He basically said it's a nuanced issue, and we got to talk about what reparations actually means. And when Wolf Blitzer brought up the fact that he basically called it a divisive issue in 2016, Bernard just kind of brushed him off. Which really, I would have liked to hear an explanation of why and how his position had changed since then. And by the way, there's a really good article, this Medium article I'm going to recommend y'all read. Bernie's supporters must stop excusing his racial missteps and demand that he do better. It's by Gregory Robert McKelvey. I just want to read a little bit from here. And by the way, this is a guy who was a Bernie delegate. This is not some centrist smear or whatever. This is a guy who's part of the Bernie Sanders camp, but he's a young black dude. And he said it is clear that he has no idea that work on substantial reparations has been occurring for generations. He acted like someone who is new to reparations. He claimed that other candidates don't understand what they are supporting, which is false. He needs to do some damn research. I want to go on and talk a little bit about kind of some broader issues that we were talking about earlier. So he goes on to talk about how there's a core of Bernie supporters that I feel do not come out for other grassroots struggles, and I think that there is an element to it. There's a lot of people who kind of do progressive LARPing. It's they're willing to share the memes on Facebook, but they're more likely to give their money to Bernie Sanders than a local activist group. So he talks about. This quote really hit me. Excuse me. As time went by, I began to look around and realize that these activists were not with me in the street when Trayvon Martin was killed or when Darren Wilson was not indicted for the murder of Michael Brown. No, it took an old, straight, rich, white man to energize these people. And don't get me wrong, I was glad that they had joined us in the fight for equality, and I was even confident that they would continue in that fight throughout the Trump presidency, but boy, was I wrong. There are far too many Bernie supporters who held on to their $27 until he announced his 2020 run, but couldn't bring themselves to give $2.70 to their local BLM coalitions, or those working for the rights of indigenous peoples, or those fighting for queer liberation. And they weren't with us in the streets when Kunas Haynes was murdered by the Portland police, but best believe they will be at a Bernie Sanders rally. And before everybody jumps on and talks, well, I'm voted for Bernie and I went to Standing Rock, which is actually I guess that's me. But what he's talking about here is a greater phenomenon where I think he is still very much tone deaf on these issues. He's not speaking about them the right way. In that answer that he gave about reparations, there's a couple things that was needed: specificity, a knowledge of the subject, and yes, say the word yes. Yes, I am for reparations. He did not. He took a minute and a half to explain his answer without saying yes, we need reparations. And again, I understand it. It's a complicated issue. It's not like there's been a consensus on it exactly. What that would look like, but it's been part of the public conversation and dialogue for literally over 100 years. There is it felt like. This is one of his weak points in the last election, and he only got very little bit better. When, if there was something that you were weak on the last time you ran, you should come back a lot stronger next time. And I think that was overall, I decided to watch the town hall, and a lot of it was Bernie playing his greatest hits. And I know that consistency, works well for him because, people see him, talking about the oligarchy back in the 70s and 80s and understand, people appreciate that consistency. But
by his greatest hits, of course, we mean, free college, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, break up the banks, all that stuff.
But I think at the same time, now he has room to go into a little bit more detail about it. These ideas are now in the public consciousness. He doesn't need to spend so much of his time, selling these policy planks. I'd like to hear him actually, talk about them in greater depth. I didn't really see that. As a matter of fact, probably the thing that made me really roll my eyes the most during the night was Wolf Blitzer asked him about socialism. And to paraphrase, Bernie's answer was socialism is when good things happen and the government does stuff. It was a very flowery answer, and it's I get it. Back in 2016, socialism was a dirty word. I think wherever you are on the radical leftist spectrum, we do have to tip our hats to Bernie for bringing it back into the American lexicon, 2 years ago. But I've done a lot of reading. I've read a lot of communist theory in the last couple of years. I understand what socialism is. What Bernie said, that isn't it. It's like if you were to try to explain capitalism by saying, capitalism is when you have money and then changes hands. But okay, so I get that. Tell me a little bit more. Again, we're at a point where I think we're able to have a deeper, more nuanced discussion about it. I mean, and I know he can do it. I mean, this is a guy who made a documentary about Eugene Debs, so it's not like he's saying that because he doesn't know. It's that I think he's still cautious about really putting himself out there as a socialist. But I think we're ready to have that conversation, even in mainstream circles. And I think it is particularly important for, the young left to understand what socialism actually is rather than confuse it with basically a capitalist welfare state. I mean, we always compare it to Scandinavia and stuff, but that's not precisely what socialism is.
I mean, Scandinavia is kind of doing great. I would not have much of a problem with us adopting the Scandinavian model. I think with that point, like there's something else we're going to talk about, how the fact that that like these sort of like positions that the mainstream media tries to like say are like way far left, like the Green New Deal, etc. Those are like, you know, like Green New Deal, like free college, like Medicare for all. These are all like overwhelmingly popular with people across the political spectrum. And when we talk about Bernie Sanders as like actually being like closer to the center in like a more international political standpoint, considering how far right the Overton window in the U.S. has gone, like that's true. Like you could more accurately say that AOC and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are closer to the center because they actually advocate for what the American people want. Now, as for the other issues that you brought up with this town hall, I didn't really watch it because I kind of already know what he's going to say for the most part. But I did distinctly remember what he said in 2016 about reparations. And he said that they were, that was like too complicated. It was like, you know, a bit complicated. And like, I think I remember specifically hearing like too diverse to implement, because you have a lot of people that have really been wronged by society for like decades and decades. Like okay, if I think like basically what he was saying, if we give reparations to African Americans, will we give reparations to women? Will we give them to LGBT people? Will we give them to immigrants? Like, how is this going to work exactly? And I kind of get where he was coming from, but I still think he should have said yes, and like, or maybe he just should have said yes, and we'll figure out exactly how to implement it later, because really nobody has been able to agree on it yet. I think although the smear machine, if he did say yes, the smear machine would find 6 ways to Sunday to go after him from the mainstream media, perhaps more than if he gave his current answer.
I would say like you can tell at least he's been having these conversations, because tying like, you know, the economic condition and the economic disparities that we talk about when we're talking about, you know, between, you know, white folks and black folks is a product of slavery. And I am glad that you mentioned that. And again, like, you know, it is important to pay attention to what he says, because he is more or less, whether you like it or not, the voice of the American left, or at least the farthest left voice that, you know, corporate media will let appear on air. So
I'd say probably AOC does a bit of a better job at that.
That is true. Yeah. I can't believe I'm AOC does a better job with that. I'm sorry. Sorry.
She's
AOC.
good at like, she's really good with messaging. Like, she roasts people on social media. She's relatable. She's more famous than anyone else in the U.S. Congress right now. Like, if she ran for president, which she's not old enough to, and she won't be for another 6 years, then she'd wipe the floor, deservedly.
Oh yeah. Well, it'd be a few years till we get a millennial president. You know, serving everybody avocado toast. Yeah. Again, just the big takeaways and points, and again, like to extrapolate things, because we don't like doing a lot of political quarterbacking on here, but we always want to tie it back to movements. Yeah, you know, make sure wherever you stand on Bernie Sanders or whatnot, if you're like a diehard supporter, if you're planning to like knock on 1,000 doors and whatnot, don't forget there's people in your community who need your energy as well. Yeah. And probably a lot more than a Bernie Sanders campaign does. I mean, let's be completely clear here. You know, there's again, if you can phone bank for Bernie Sanders, then you can make some phone calls for, you know, Cosecha Kalamazoo, or for the Hope Network, or you know, for you know, the local chapter of the DSA, so on and so forth. If you can donate some money to Bernie Sanders, you can donate money to a local organization.
And if you don't have money, you can donate your time, like we said, making calls, like helping people like make signs, train direct actions. There's a lot of things you can do out there.
Yeah, and it remains to be seen. Again, we'll be talking more about like long-term strategy and, you know, the implications of the election as moving forward. But for now, I want everybody to really understand that and think about that thoroughly. You need to manage your time. If you're going to be out there for, you know, New Deal grandpa, don't neglect your local community, because honestly, like $27 would mean a lot more to, the old homeless guy named Bernie down the street than to the Bernie Sanders. All right, so I guess let me not ramble so much. Let's go ahead and take a break. We come back. We've got a few more things to talk about on the show tonight. Thanks again for tuning in. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Listening to 89.1 WIDR FM, your only source for Radio Evolution.
It may not be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Hello, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. So, this next topic, okay, so just a little observation before you talk about the actual context of this, Nora. You know, one of the things that I think is really telling about the era we live in is the doomsday clock is, I think it's at about 2 minutes to midnight. This is roughly where it was at during the Cold War. And everybody, especially if you talk to boomers, like my parents, the threat of thermonuclear war was an ever-present fear in their lives. What I find really interesting about the modern world is we're right back where we were. As a matter of fact, there have been times in the last couple of years, especially since Trump got into office, that it feels like we've gotten closer to this kind of nuclear winter than we have since the Cuban Missile Crisis. But I don't know if it's that people are jaded or that we've got a couple of different potential apocalypses now. You know, you have the slow death of climate change versus the fast and fiery death of nuclear Armageddon. But there have been some really alarming things going on the subject of nuclear proliferation that, again, have been kind of pushed to the background and not really talked about a whole lot. And I'll let you go ahead and lead off with that, Nora.
Yeah, so I'm just going to quote this Reuters article. Russian state television has listed U.S. military facilities that Moscow might target in the event of a nuclear strike, and said that a hypersonic missile Russia is developing would be able to hit them in less than 5 minutes.
Oh boy!
Yeah, the targets include the Pentagon and the presidential retreat in Camp David, Maryland, as well as a few West Coast Air Force bases. The report, unusual even by the sometimes bellicose standards of the Russian state TV, was broadcast on Sunday evening, days after President Putin said Moscow is ready for a Cuban Missile-style crisis that the U.S. wanted one. With tensions rising over Russian fears that the U.S. might deploy intermediate-range missiles, and Europe as a Cold War-era arms race control treaty unravels, keep that in mind. This is probably why this stuff is happening in the first place, as well as the constant Russia hysteria. Putin said that Russia would be forced to respond by placing hypersonic nuclear missiles on submarines near U.S. waters.
Oh man, that's rough.
Yeah,
that's no good. And yeah, like we've been warning y'all since the beginning. Like, don't buy into the again. There's a distinction that needs to be made about like the president's connection to Russian oligarchs and the whole like nationalist neo-McCarthyism that's going on, because any kind of rhetoric that talks about us trying to get tough with Russia or be hostile towards Russia, that person is a damn fool, and they are playing with nuclear fire. Literally.
Yeah. It's not good.
Calm down, Rachel Maddow.
Oh, man.
We don't want to die. Oh, man. Yeah, and... again, this is also going on.
She probably had a field day with this story, let's be honest.
Probably. Yeah,
Russia.
Man, imagine if, how bad it would be if we didn't have someone in there who was a Putin puppet. I mean, that is a joke. Like, if you actually look at the policy, like, this administration has escalated tensions with Russia of their own accord. Now, you could play some hypothetical games and wonder, like, if it would be better or worse under a Clinton presidency or some of the other people running. But the bottom line is, like, it is not good to have bad relations with the world's second... They're still the second largest nuclear superpower on the planet. It would behoove us to try to be friendly with them to some degree and extent. And that doesn't mean that you like Vladimir Putin. He's a dictator.
He's not a good dude by any stretch.
He's thrown some of our favorite musicians in prison. Go see Pussy Riot if you get a chance. They're coming to the States this summer, and I think you got a chance to see them.
Oh yeah, I got to see them like a little bit over a year ago.
Lucky.
They were in they were in Chicago. I have an interesting story behind that, but I'm not going to get into that on air.
All right.
But they were in Detroit a few months after. I don't know when or where they'd be coming back to the States, but like do keep an eye on that.
Yeah, I saw they were playing a couple festivals this year. All right. So anyway, getting back on topic. We're looking at tensions are red hot between Pakistan and India, which, if you don't know too much about the politics, they've had a rivalry and enmity towards each other for many, many decades now. It's a disputed territory issue.
They've had a rivalry ever since, like, the Brits arbitrarily drew a line to separate the two countries.
Yes, yeah,
post-colonially,
that's right.
And the reason why this is coming back up now is, quoting from Democracy Now, tension is continuing to escalate between the nuclear-armed rivals India and Pakistan after India carried out airstrikes inside Pakistan Tuesday for the first time since 1971. India said it was targeting a camp of the militant separatist group Jaish-e-Mohammed, I might be pronouncing that wrong, which claims responsibility for a recent attack in the Indian-administrated region of Kashmir that killed more than 40 Indian soldiers, although Pakistan had denied the claim. India says Tuesday's air raid killed a very large number of militants, but Pakistan said there were no casualties from the attack. Pakistan is now claiming it has shot down 2 Indian military jets and captured a pair of Indian jet pilots. Meanwhile, India claims its foiled attempt by Pakistan to bomb military installations inside India. Now, the U.S., Russia, China, and the EU have all urged both of the nuclear rivals to show restraint. Now, because you get these 4 superpowers at the same table and on the same page, this issue is not common. So I'll say that, like, there's a very good chance they'll succeed in, de-escalating these tensions. However, the U.S. Defense contractors do sell, like, a ton of weapons to India. And also so does, Russian defense contractors, to be fair. Mm-hmm. So I still have some uncertainty out of where this goes. But both countries are believed India and Pakistan believed to have over 100 nuclear warheads and have fought 3 wars since 1947. So this is like a new news story, like that's literally just started developing this week. Mm-hmm. But like even on the other side of the world, like there's possibilities for horrible nuclear conflict that doesn't even really involve us.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention while we are on this topic, it has been reported that the Trump administration is thinking about loosening certain precedent when it comes to the selling of nuclear technologies, particularly vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia. They have talked about selling nuclear technologies to Saudi Arabia, and they say that this is it's only for the generation of nuclear power, but it of course they lie constantly. Speaking of the current administration, and it has been shown that the types of things that they are posing to sell to Saudi Arabia could be used to develop a nuclear weapon. Now, again, this is all about the money. It's all about them wanting to, sell these things. Like Trump has actually been, how he's like our president is. Sometimes he's honest, but it's always about the quote-unquote wrong stuff, like stuff like the deep state would not want him. It's like, you can't just say we're going in for their oil. You gotta say you gotta say freedom and democracy and other stuff. Now, I don't know if anybody listens to the show regularly kind of knows why that's a horrible. That could be the worst idea in the long, sad history of bad ideas. Because Saudi Arabia, one, they are a brutal dictatorship, currently run by a prince who he's gone so off the rails that even his mainstream allies, people in the U.S. government, people in the international corporate class have been like, "Yo, you can't just chop up journalists and expect nobody to say anything." And also, Saudi Arabia has a long history of selling their weapons to terrorist groups. Now, whether that would extend to nuclear technology or not, you can't really postulate, but you can say that the Wahhabi government of Saudi Arabia is one of the most fanatical regimes in the world, and you have a particularly volatile prince currently leading it. So, yeah, this is exactly... I don't know what would be a good time to sell them nuclear weapons, but this is the exact worst time you possibly could sell them nuclear technology. It's all about them Benjamins, baby. So, it's just so important we pay attention to this stuff because, again, it feels like it's hard to pierce through the constant, drama that is living under the Trump administration and the constant injustices that he's always perpetrating. But we are basically we're opening Pandora's box all over again, letting some of the most volatile governments in the world have access to nuclear technology. I started the show making an analogy about living in a Fallout type world. Well, it's quite literally, this is where we could be heading if we don't try to nip these sorts of things in the bud. In the bud. Yes. That's really much what I got to say on the nuclear stuff. I know you had a few other. Did you have a few other quick hits there, Nora?
Yeah. So there's these are a few quick hits. One of them is that Axios reports that U.S. government agencies have received thousands of allegations of sexual abuse to unaccompanied migrant minors in U.S. custody, which total to about 6,000 roughly from 2014 to 2018. So this is even before the Trump administration. What else? In more good news, Ohio voters win legal protections for Lake Erie and are allowed to sue on behalf of the lake in order to protect it, which is fantastic.
Yep. Dope. Good job to our Ohio, or congratulations to our comrades from the Buckeye State.
Yeah, no kidding. There's a bill that came from the House and also passed the Senate that protects over 1 million acres of wilderness and creates new national sites. So it's headed to Trump's desk, but considering what he's trying to do with already existing national sites, it's fairly unlikely that I'll sign it into law, but we'll see what happens. There was also a new voting rights legislation to come up into the House, which is, kind of bring back all the things that were taken, by the Supreme Court in 2013 from the original Voting Rights Act. But good news with the Supreme Court, they did put an end to state and local civil asset forfeiture as we know it. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's when that's been until very recently legal for the cops to just steal your stuff and indefinitely hold it as part of an ongoing investigation.
Yeah, that is actually some
even
really
if they're
good
never
news.
convicted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm really glad that's going to happen. I'm glad that like the cops are not going to be the robbers in this case. I mean, they're still going to get away with doing a lot of really bad stuff, and they'll probably still do similar things even though it's illegal now.
Mm-hmm.
But there is also significant steps in marijuana legalization for a number of states. Like you probably already heard of like what's going on in New York, New Jersey, and Minnesota. But the bills have passed hurdles in also New Mexico, New Hampshire, Hawaii, Vermont, and yeah, that's like 7 different states where it's really made some significant traction, and it's hard to see which one it'll like go through first, but like so far it's looking like that's going to be New Jersey. Keep yourself tuned for when that happens. Now today, you've probably heard like from more mainstream media sources that like are really like zeroing in on this Cohen hearing, and it's got like some important stuff, makes no mistake. But like also it's a long thing that I didn't really watch either. I'm gonna wait for the more of the highlights to come out for that after it's been at least a day. But what stood out to me the most was the testimony for how racist Mr. Trump is even in private. Like at first I thought he was just like kind of, when he announced his campaign, I thought he was just kind of being a performative racist to kind of like drum up those white voters. But no, it's pretty egregious. Like Cohen quoted him saying he was quoted by saying, he once asked me if I could name a country run by a black person that wasn't an S-word hole. And this is when Barack Obama was president. And Trump told Cohen that black people will never vote for Trump because, quote, they are too stupid. And yeah. So it's really, really horrible stuff. I'm pretty sure, I'm going to guarantee he said like more like really racist stuff in private too.
I could make a really off-color joke about him the pot calling the kettle black. The joke there is that I would have a hard time thinking of any person, let alone any black person, that was somehow dumber than Donald Trump. Really good. Is it?
Oh man. Something that's like actually, I guess, more significant to like specific policy in the Cohen interview. AOC was in the room for the testimony and got Cohen to admit that Trump was involved with insurance fraud, tax fraud regarding his golf courses, and public funding. And he got Cohen to agree that Congress should review Trump's tax returns and financial records. And this is happening while like almost everyone in the committee was like asking like innocuous questions about Michael Cohen's character. Like just the same kind of like level of tone-deaf BS that nobody cares about when they should have been asking important stuff during the Mark Zuckerberg grilling. But AOC was able to turn that into like comprehensive policy of how we should like hold our federal government accountable with the money it uses.
And again, like what I really liked about that is, one of the things we've been saying since the beginning. It's like, oh, you want to impeach Trump? It's like, it's the money, Lebowski. That's again, like this guy who's like, if you just go follow like the emoluments clause in the Constitution, Trump could have gotten impeached like his first week in office. And what it does is really highlight that fact. Like, Trump is most certainly guilty of a lot of financial crimes. And again, hats off to AOC for actually looking into the right stuff instead of just, it's like, it feels like the rest of the Congress is like, so when did you last hear about Donald Trump going to Moscow? And did he share a milkshake at the Moscow McDonald's with Vladimir Putin? Did Michael Cohen is like, I don't recall. It's like, can you ask me about any of the bad stuff we already did? No. We just want to see if there's any way we can paint him as a Russian stooge. Let's see. Any other quick hits, Nora? I've got like one, and then I think maybe we'll like go ahead and kind of wrap up the program.
I can't really think of any. I mean, we probably should talk about like local community events, but I don't have any in front of me right now.
Oh, okay. Well, we I think we can do that on the way out here. I did want to give an update on Venezuela. So, again, a lot of what we're kind of doing on the show is, we've talked about it in greater depth, but I want to just kind of update things. It's a quick hit because I basically just want to buck against the propaganda that's out there about what Venezuela is and is not doing. Again, something that's come, big topic this week is what's going on with aid. So I want to clear up something that you would not know if you only heard about this from the mainstream media. Venezuela is not denying all aid. It is specifically only rejecting aid from the United States. Aid that is coming from Cuba, Russia, China, even other capitalist powers like the UK. They are letting that aid come through. It is specifically aid from the United States that they are rejecting. And again, they have very good reasons for doing so. Elliot Abrams, who is the main envoy for Venezuela, as chosen by the Trump administration, among his myriad number of war crimes committed in Central and South America, included using humanitarian aid to smuggle weapons into the country for the opposition guerrillas in Nicaragua. So if you're Venezuela and you see that Elliot Abrams is back, I would be a little suspicious of U.S. aid as well. And I also wanted to highlight, there's, the big news is like, oh, they set fire to a bunch of, again, United States aid. Even in the pictures, you see U.S. aid, U.S. AID. And there was video footage posted by Max Blumenthal, who's, again, an independent journalist, but doing a lot of good work on this issue. He posted a video that appears to show an opposition guerrillero throwing a Molotov cocktail at a truck loaded with U.S. aid. What this basically means is the basic it was opposition that the opposition threw the Molotov is what they're saying. So it was kind of like even under this, it was like kind of staged to begin with. The clip shows the moment a man on the Colombian side of the border pelted a Molotov cocktail at the truck, while another video from the scene showed the opposition activists openly preparing the incendiary devices. So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like this was like a staged event to show like the tyranny of the Maduro government just burning this aid that people need. When again, aid from the U.S. Aid from the U.S. is shown to be kind of a Trojan horse historically by the very same people that were involved the last time this happened. And two, it sounds like the opposition kind of staged this event in the first place to make the Maduro government look bad. So that is your weekly counter propaganda on the Venezuela issue. And again, I want to remind everybody, specifically when it comes to Venezuela, be very doubtful about what the mainstream corporate media has to say on it, because it seems like they're rallying everybody towards regime change again, and we all know how that plays out. It is not good. All right, and I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the program. I want to thank all of y'all for listening today. And before we go, I want to remind everybody to do our little activist calendar, tell you a little bit about what's going on this week in the community. If I can pull up my events real quick here, which is why is it giving me a problem here. What is that? There we go. All right. Sorry about that. So, a couple of some really important stuff going up this week. Tomorrow at 1:30 p.m., there is going to the trial of Isaiah Gathing is going to be going on at the 9th District Circuit Court. They are asking for people to come in solidarity. This is a child who, excuse me, I'll just read from the event, sorry. Please join us at the trial of Isaiah Gathing, where he will be tried as an adult at the age of 16 years for an act of self-defense. Isaiah has disability rights that are associated with an IEP that has been in place in Kalamazoo Public Schools since he was in 3rd grade. After a KPS teacher, Danis, inserted himself into a disruption in the class next door, where he encountered Isaiah, the teacher made physical contact with him, which negatively impacted his documented disability and resulted in a defensive response. During the pretrial, Danis testified with conflicting recollections of the occurrence, which was 1 year ago. And again, just to boil it down, they're talking about making a mentally disabled young black man, 16 years old, trying him as an adult for assault. It is really morally reprehensible, and if you want to stand in solidarity, that's going to be at the County 9th District Circuit Court, 1:30 p.m. That's 1536 Gull Road. So some other stuff going on this weekend. On Saturday, March 2nd, over at the Invisible College, there's going to be a Narcan training at 7 o'clock. Basically, there's going to be people from the COPE network there to kind of train, talk about the opioid epidemic, and we'll be giving out free doses of Narcan. If you are unaware, the Invisible College is a house venue in the Vine neighborhood. Look up the event. It's Narcan Training and Fundraiser Show. You can message the hosts or myself. I'm one of the hosts of this event, and ask about the address if you want to come. Over at the Kalamazoo 1st Congressional UCC at 7 p.m., there is going to be a Trans Ally study group. That will be from 7 p.m. to 8:30. And that's about it for this week. So I want to thank y'all for tuning in. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.